Hey there, this is Natalie, and as promised I'm going to be covering Mushoku Tensei or Jobless Reincarnation on my channel now, as well as my usual ReZero and general anime content. I'm planning to split this stuff between videos that are suitable for anime only fans and analysis that goes further into the source material. But for the first few videos, I want to stick to things anime onlys can watch without spoilers. So this is going to be a video looking at Roxy as a character and why she's so special to Rudeus early in the story. There will be some information about Roxy here that isn't apparent from the anime so far, but I won't be spoiling any future plot points or big reveals about her. Roxy is an accomplished mage when we first meet her, able to use saint-level water magic. At the start of the story, this seems very impressive, given saint-level magicians are not commonplace. But given the ranking system for both magic and sword arts in the setting of Mushoku Tensei has 7 levels: beginner, intermediate, advanced, saint, king, emperor and god, there's already plenty of scope for Roxy to continue to become more powerful. This also of course means that there's scope for Rudeus to surpass her, and for other far more powerful magicians to appear. Roxy reaches the Water King level herself after leaving her post as Rudeus's tutor, having got him up to the Saint level already. Still, despite the fact she's incredibly accomplished, with bards singing songs about her, her faculty at the University of Magic she attended remembering her well, and a position as a royal court magician being opened up for her, Roxy still has something of a sense of inadequacy. This partly stems from the prejudice she encounters for being of a demon race, but there is more to it than that. Roxy never fit in her home village on the demon continent, because the usual method of communication there is telepathy. Roxy, for whatever reason, was unable to communicate that way, and while her family made an effort to speak out loud to her, this isolated her from everyone around her while she was growing up. She never understood why she couldn't do something that came so naturally to everybody else. Equally, a feature of Roxy's race is that they look extremely young for most of their long lives. Roxy is actually in her 40s when we first see her, but looks like a young teenager. Outside of the demon continent, most people aren't aware of this quirk of her race, and assume she's a child, which means unless somebody knows her by reputation, she's constantly having to prove her maturity and competence. She believes this makes her unattractive too, especially when she's in the company of more mature-looking and obviously sexy women like Elena Lise. Roxy believes nobody would ever want her because of this, and remains romantically inexperienced in her 40s. She has a romantic side, and dreams of falling in love on an adventure, but she doesn't think that could ever really happen for her. This was actually one of the reasons Roxy became an adventurer, as well as having an ambition of raising her magic skills, but it never worked out for her, with everyone around her still assuming she was a kid, just compounding her insecurities about her looks. In fact, Roxy was so convinced that love would never be on the cards for her that she never even really thought about wanting it, until she saw how intimate Paul and Zenith were together, and began to fantasize about having a relationship like that for herself. After all, everyone else saw her as a child, and she couldn't form a relationship with someone of her own race due to her lack of telepathic communication ability. Roxy's inferiority complex is only exacerbated by how quickly Rudy progresses, both in his training with her, and in what he tells her later in his letters when he's tutoring Eris. Rudeus achieves things Roxy simply can't do, like being able to cast spells without incantations, and he does this completely naturally. And he has a larger mana capacity than she does. Essentially, she'd always considered herself talented, but having a student so young who can quickly surpass her makes her feel sad, as well as determined to work harder and improve her own magic. Rudeus even seems to be better at teaching than Roxy from her perspective, as he manages to make progress with the notoriously difficult student Eris, as well as with Ghislaine, while Roxy struggles to get the psychopathic young prince she's tutoring to study at all. To her, Rudeus is both an amazing talent she had the privilege to teach, and someone who makes her feel decidedly mediocre. She admires and cares for him, but it disturbs her to hear him call her master, because she's certain he's destined to reach far greater heights than she thinks are within her potential. But conversely, Rudeus not only admires Roxy a huge amount, he actually quite literally worships her. This is half played as a light-hearted thing, with Rudy keeping the pantsuit he stole from her when he was a kid as what he calls a holy relic, that he takes with him when he needs strength and literally prays in front of, always referring to Roxy as his god, something he keeps up well into adulthood. But he's serious in his reverence for Roxy. He'll not hear any criticism of her, and is always trying to pass off his own achievements as being down to her, long after she left her role as his tutor. He even makes and sells figurines of her, which will actually play a surprising role in the plot later on. Roxy, with her sense of inferiority, would be quite bewildered if she knew the extent to which Rudeus adores her, and the amount of strength he draws in his most difficult times by remembering her and praying to her underwear. But to the audience who know a lot more about Rudeus's inner self, it makes sense. It was Roxy who was with him as he overcame what was effectively one of the biggest and most deep-seated hang-ups left over from his past life, leaving his home and going out into the world. Of course, to Roxy, he was a 5-year-old child, and his fear was just a normal part of being a kid doing something for the first time, and so she could never know how important this was to him as a personal breakthrough. Rudy knows this, that Roxy wasn't trying to do anything special when she took him outside for the first time and stopped him being afraid that people would stare or harm him, that she thought she was just dealing with a typical nervous child. But what her intentions were don't matter to him. The result was that Roxy changed his life and enabled him to get over something from his old life that would have stopped him being able to live the full life he's determined to in this new world. There are quite a lot of similarities between Rudy and Roxy in this early part of the story too. Both are mentally a lot older than they appear to other people. Both are romantically inexperienced and would like for that not to be the case, but are restricted by the fact they appear to be much younger than they are. In Roxy's case, this is partly all in her head, as there certainly are people who find her attractive, but in Rudy's case, he's been reincarnated and actually just has to wait it out until his new body grows up. They're both determined not to let themselves stagnate, and to seek out new knowledge and experience. For Roxy, this is simply in her nature, but for Rudeus, this is part of the promise he made to himself to actually try in this new life. He can't waste his potential a second time around, and this makes him extremely motivated to keep learning, as well as very grateful to all of those who've taught him things, especially his very first teacher, Roxy. Roxy and Rudeus also both have the experience of growing up feeling like something of an outsider to their families. Roxy couldn't communicate in the way her family expected, whereas Rudeus was in the unusual position of having a mind that was older than his parents, though lacking in life experience, plus knowledge of a more technologically and scientifically advanced world, making it hard for him to play the role of a normal son. They both love their families in their own ways, but neither had the experience of childhood a normal kid growing up in their particular cultures would have had. These are things they don't know about each other in those early times spent together, but they create parallels between these characters that make a strong bond between them easy to see forming. Another similarity is that both characters have an air of imposter syndrome about them. Roxy is uncomfortable being talked about as the great master who taught Rudeus everything he knew, even though he is sincere in this, because she doesn't believe she's anything all that special compared to him. Rudeus is uncomfortable with people talking up his accomplishments, even though it to some degree makes him happy, because he believes deep down that he could only do any of it because he was reincarnated with all of his old memories, that he got an unfair advantage. He also carries a lot of guilt and shame for the way he lived his first life, and finds it hard to see himself as someone who could ever be admired as he really is, rather than as the new person people around him see. Again, this isn't something they know about each other, but they see themselves in similar ways, as people getting credit they don't really deserve. Rudeus's habit of deflecting credit he gets onto Roxy, thinking she'll get a confidence boost from this, shows that he doesn't really understand this about her, and perhaps thinks she's just humble. While the relationship the two of them have from the early part of Rudy's life is a positive one for both of them, he does have a tendency to see Roxy through rose-tinted glasses. Roxy and Paul were the first big influences he had in his new life, with Zenith and Lilia playing a less prominent role in teaching him. He sees all of Paul's flaws very clearly, though it is a sign of his own inexperience from his past life that he believes he knows all the answers to being a better husband and parent at this point in the story, but he doesn't see any of Roxy's. He credits Roxy with teaching him to accept other people, claiming it was her influence that allowed him to make friends with Rejerd without fear. But Roxy herself is terrified of the Spurred, and just as prejudiced against them as anyone else of her race. This isn't actually Roxy's fault, for reasons I won't go into because they'll be revealed later in the currently airing season, but Rudy doesn't really notice that she's not as tolerant as he claims he's become through her teaching. I'm not going to talk about what happens when Roxy and Rudeus are reunited in the story, though I don't think it's really much of a spoiler that they will be at some point, after how much value's been put on the bond between them in the first arc. It was funny in a sad way to see them keep missing each other early in Core 2, but the fact Roxy's out there looking for him, along with members of Paul's old adventuring party, shows her most talented student means a lot to her too. But what do you guys think about Roxy? Let me know in the comments. Where this is an anime-only video, if you want to talk about spoilers from beyond the latest episode, please put a spoiler warning and some space before the comment, so people have to expand it to read it. I will be making some content about later arcs soon for light novel and web novel readers. Thank you as always to my supporters on Patreon, and to everyone who helps me out by subscribing to my channel and liking my videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again very soon.